And to kick off with, I think, a key emotion for this season, probably two of the things that we've liked least about it, and two of the things that probably as human beings we struggle with the most, but also in a strange way are one of the most essential functions of the human mind. And anxiety is probably the hardest of our more challenging emotions to ignore. And it's designed that way because the job of anxiety is to get your attention when there's something going on in the world around you that might be risky, it might be important, you might need to focus on it. Life is busy, there are so many demands for our attention. Sometimes your brain needs to grab yours to make sure that you avoid a bad outcome, and that's the job of anxiety. It acts a bit like your brain's smoke alarm. So it alerts you to the risk that there might be something you need to act or react to. And anxiety also sets you up ready for that action or reaction, whatever you might need to do to respond, using that physiological system that you might have heard of called the fight or flight system. And it's a complex physiological chain reaction coordinating so many different parts of your body and your mind, so that you're ready to respond to life's dramatic moments. And it's really designed to be a short-term response system. You know, you're walking down the street to get your Saturday paper or something, and a bear jumps out from behind a car, which is probably unlikely in the UK. But hey, whatever it is, in those acute crisis moments, that system is really good at coordinating everything that you need. Whether you're going to fight up the bear or run for your life, you're ready. But that system isn't only for life's distressing acute stress moments. It is your stress response. And physiologically, stress isn't just distress. It's not just the challenging moments. Stress is anything that requires your brain or your body to adapt, to react, to change, to adjust. So they could be physical demands of a moment, or they could be cognitive brain demands like needing to pay attention or problem solve, or just juggle lots of things at once. In our 21st century, 24/7 busy world, so much of our stress is just about the volume of stuff that we're juggling. And in this season, these two issues, anxiety and stress, have been really significant for lots of different reasons. For one, everybody's stress level has been raised, whether you found lockdown distressing or not, whether you've been aware of it being stressful or not. Maybe actually your problem has been you're bored stiff, you've been furloughed, you've been stuck at home, you've had nothing to do, you've been isolated. Those things are strangely stressful because when your daily routine and rhythm is shot to pieces like that, your brain has to work much harder. So if you think of the challenges of life and your normal week as a bit like climbing a wall, when all your usual handholds are there, all the normal things you expect to have in place as part of your routine, it's easy. You do it without thinking. It's automatic pilot. But lockdown's been a bit like climbing a wall with all those handholds gone. And there's some additional boulders and things you've got to figure out how to get around. Everything's moved around. And that requires a lot more work on your mind, a lot more demand on your brain, whether it's literal problem solving, juggling, capacity issues. Some of us, you've already heard us talking about the challenges of homeschooling, home working, or adapting to constant change and uncertainty. Some of us are very aware of just a raised demand. For others, it has been the challenges of isolation, loss of productivity, or the loss of things that are in our basic human DNA to need, like human connection, physical connection, hugs, that literal physical connection with other human beings. And when your stress baseline rises, you can think of it as a bit like the water level in a pool. So you can't see my feet, but they're down here, trust me. And if I was stood in a pool right now and the water level was down by my ankles, little waves in that pool, which are like the everyday waves of just the little normal challenges of life, they're no problem when your baseline is low. But in a season like this, where your stress baseline has risen, we all have a crisis point where we start to feel close to overwhelm. And when we're in this space, those little things start to feel like actually they might push us under. They might push us into a zone where we can't cope. They might genuinely push you beyond what you can cognitively hold in that moment, your emotional capacity to manage things in that moment, your physical capacity. We get tired as human beings. We have limits. And so because in this moment, we've all been on the edge of overwhelm. Some of us over long periods of time. Some of us just with it ebbing and flowing, those moments when lots seems to happen, or you hear something new on the news and it triggers your stress response as your mind's trying to figure out what that means. And the thing is, emotions like anxiety are on the same physiological system. So if your baseline has risen high anyway, then anxiety feels much more ever present. It takes less to push you into an anxiety trigger. It's like when your smoke alarm is just hyper reactive and it goes off every time you put toast on. And when your brain is in that hyper alert state, it changes the way you perceive and act and react to so many things. Like at night when you suddenly hear a sound and you think, gosh, what is that? Is something wrong, or is somebody trying to break in? And suddenly you can hear every sound you would normally never even notice. Your brain is hyper alert. You're on edge. You're twitchy and prickly. And other things change as well. When you're in that overwhelm zone, your brain goes into this sort of crisis management mode. And so it literally turns down your thinking analytical brain. It's like, this isn't the place to start having deep thoughts or going into some kind of deep analysis. So it's really hard to think clearly, to feel rational. Everything gets reduced to simple binary choices. Are you right or are you wrong? Is this good or bad? Success or disaster? And it's so easy to feel like all of those negative things are true. So you're already feeling overwhelmed. You're already feeling under pressure. You're already feeling anxious, and things just start to feel bleak and negative and difficult in these moments. So feeling an emotion like anxiety isn't optional. It's an essential human emotion. It keeps you safe. You know, I have an 8-year-old son. He could sometimes do with more anxiety, believe me. In this season as well, it's inevitable as we're stepping into spaces where we know we're exposed to risk. We have to make difficult decisions. We will experience anxiety. So it's interesting then that one of the words that's most used in the Bible for fear is actually this Greek word. And the Greek, I always think the Greek language is a bit like they talk about, Eskimos have more than one word for snow. English is really quite limited, I think, in so many ways. And the Greek language is beautiful and poetic. And as people of faith, the Bible is this source of ancient wisdom in moments of life, whatever life is throwing. And this Greek word for fear that's used so often, phobos, it's the same one that we get our word for phobia from. So we recognize it, but it describes that specific type of fear when you're in overwhelm and you feel like your capacity to cope with the situation has been exceeded. You have no choice but to feel like you've got to get out, you've got to run away. You're in that crisis mode. And there's this amazing story when the disciples were Jesus' mates who he hung out with and taught and who journeyed with him when he was around on the earth. And the disciples are in this boat and Jesus isn't actually with them in the moment, but they're in this time of crisis. It's dark, it's the middle of the night, and it's stormy, and they are terrified and they're panicking. And Jesus comes to them and he actually walks to them across the water. It's one of the famous miracles in the New Testament. And he says to them, do not fear. And so often in the Bible, it says that. And people will repeat that to us in stressful moments or anxiety moments. And the thing is that although people mean that to be helpful, it can feel like it can feel like people are actually speaking down to us. They're saying you've done something wrong by feeling anxious. And that's not always hugely helpful. Remember, anxiety is an essential human emotion. And in that moment when Jesus says to us, do not fear, it's important that we understand, therefore, the word that he's saying is not don't experience an emotion like anxiety. What he's saying is in those moments when it's stressful, when life is chaotic, when you feel in the dark or in the middle of a storm, you don't need to feel overwhelmed. You don't need to run. It's a word of reassurance, not of reprimand. And what he's saying to them and what he goes on to say is, you can take courage because I'm here. You're not doing this on your own. There's another source of strength, of encouragement, of something that can help us in those moments when life has gone crazy, when the world around us is in chaos. And what happens actually in that moment is that Peter, he's one of the disciples, actually does something crazy. He steps out of the boat and he walks on water across to Jesus. Because when he's got his eyes fixed on Jesus, he's found this source of something extra, And so many of us need that in moments like this, when we're really aware of having reached our own limits, when we fix our eyes on something solid, something secure, like God. We can find a source of something that gets us through those moments. We can exceed what we should be able to do. We can manage even in the dark, even in crisis. And there's this human moment, though, when Peter, for a moment, while he's doing this amazing thing, his attention is drawn suddenly to the wind and the waves. And it's like that overwhelm level rises again, and he feels the panic rise because he's thinking, what am I doing? And he is out of his depth. But again, what Jesus says is what he does actually is he reaches out a hand to him and he reminds him that he's there. And again, that connection with something bigger, something better, something more secure helps us in those moments. It's like Jesus isn't saying you shouldn't feel anxious, you idiot, get a grip. What he's saying is, it's okay. I'm here. You're not on your own. You don't need to run. You can do this. We can do this together. I'm with you. So I guess that's my message tonight in a time when anxiety and stress is inevitable. God doesn't take away our anxiety. It's part of the amazing brain that he's designed. But in moments of chaos, with storms all around and darkness, we can hold our nerve because we know that God is with us. There is a source of something bigger and better we can reach out to. And actually, God reaches out to us in our fear.